Hey guys, welcome to day 42. Today we're looking at derivatives of inverses. I wouldn't say this is a hard topic. I'd say it's a really tricky topic. But let's take a look at it. First thing, I want you to channel your inner Algebra 2 or pre-calc. I can't remember when you guys remember or learn about inverses. But let's just talk a little bit about inverses and specifically inverse notation. Okay, so the first thing is this little f with a superscript -1 of x. That's our notation for inverse. So again, this is our notation for inverse. And you should have seen that before in previous classes, but just as a reminder. Sometimes they'll let you know that we're dealing with inverses by using that inverse notation. But sometimes they let you know you're dealing with inverses because they use properties of inverses. So sometimes they tell you straight up G and F are inverses. Sometimes they use the notation, and sometimes they use the properties. If F and G are inverses, the property then is both F of G of X equals G of F of X equals X. If you see this, if they tell you that statement, F of G of X equals G of F of X, which equals X, then we know F and G are inverses. Okay. So when we have inverse functions have similarities between their derivatives at the points that transfer between the two. Okay, so let me just draw a little graph for you here to get you an idea of what's going on. Hold on 1 second. Okay, so let's say we're told here that F and G are inverses. By the way, inverses are reflections about the line y equals x. So here's what we know about inverses, right? And it may be the way that you learned how to solve inverses. One way to solve for an inverse is, one method is people switch x and y and then solve for y. So every point, let's say that there's a point on f of x that is the point AB. Okay? So there's a point on f of x that is a point AB. That means there is a corresponding point on g of x that's the reciprocal, or that's just the reverse of those two. That means there's a point on g of x that has to be BA. Right, so to give these numbers, right, maybe this is the point 6,1. There's a corresponding point of 1,6 over here. Okay. Those are the points, right, that are going to have a relationship with derivatives. Okay, the derivatives are always going to be inverses of each other. For example, I'm just going to draw in a tangent line. Let's say I find f prime of a here. here's my tangent line slope. F prime of A then would be the slope of that line. Let's say that F prime of A has a slope of M. Well, that means that there's at the corresponding point here, at that point BA, the slope of the tangent line is going to be the reciprocal of M. Over here, the slope of the tangent line would be G prime of B would have a slope of 1 over M. For example, if F prime of A is a fourth, then G prime of B would be 1 over a fourth, which would be 4. Okay. What I want you to notice is the 2 points that have a relationship have different x values. Notice this and this are different. One is A, one is B, right? To put this in terms, right, F prime of 6, let's say, is 3, then G prime of 1 would be a third. So what's confusing about this for a lot of students is that we're using the same x value in both of them. The x value of one is always the y value of the other, and vice versa. So that's just something that we have to keep in mind. What I always want you to think about is that point. I always want you to identify the point on the function and think about what would that point look like on the inverse. Well, if it's a 0.23 on f, then the point will be 3.2 on f inverse. Okay? So let's take a look at how this gets assessed on the AP exam. Go ahead and copy this table in. And here's the type of problem they might see. Okay. Oh no. Okay, so here we have g of x is a function such that g of f of x equals f of g of x equals x. It says find g prime of 6. Okay, so we don't have a table for g, but what we have a table for is f. And what I want you to do is find that transfer point for g. So again, when we take a look at the points that we know on f, we know the points 2, 6. So when we take a look at this, we see we have points 2, 6, 3, 8, and 6, negative 5. So I want to know, those are all my points on F, right? Those are points on F. I want to figure out all the corresponding points on G. So these will be points x, g of x. Since we want g prime of 6, the point on F that we're going to care about is the point 26. This is what we're looking at. This right here is your red herring. Okay? What people are going to, the most common wrong answer here is people will say 1/7 for an answer. Okay, but g prime of 6 is going to relate to f prime of 2. Okay, these are the 2 points that correspond to each other. So I know f prime of 2 is -4. That means g prime of 6 is the reciprocal of that, is -1/4. We'll stop there, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. 2 chains, bye.